It was early morning in a quiet town in Virginia. The roads were still empty, and the sky was a soft gray. Deputy Ryan Taylor sat in his patrol car, sipping his coffee and watching the road ahead. He had been on the job for 5 years, and most mornings were slow. He liked it that way, peaceful, simple, but that morning was about to change. As he looked up, he noticed an old Ford F-150 driving along the empty road. The truck looked worn out, with faded red paint and a few dents on the side. It wasn't speeding, but it wasn't driving straight either. It swerved a little now and then, drifting toward the edge of the lane. Ryan narrowed his eyes and put down his coffee. Maybe he's tired, or worse, maybe he's been drinking, Ryan said to himself. He turned on his lights and pulled out behind the truck. The driver didn't speed up or try to get away. Instead, the truck slowly came to a stop on the side of the road. Ryan parked behind it, stepped out of his car, and walked toward the driver's window. The window rolled down, and an older man looked out at him. He had a long gray beard and deep lines on his face, like someone who had spent a lot of time outdoors. His eyes were calm but sharp, like he was always thinking. "License and registration, please," Ryan said in a polite but firm voice. The man didn't speak right away. He looked at Ryan for a few seconds, then reached into the glove box and handed over his documents. "You boys really sure about this?" the man asked quietly. Ryan raised an eyebrow. It was a strange thing to say. He looked over the license. The name was William Cross. The address was from a town Ryan had never heard of. Nothing about the ID seemed fake, but something felt off. Just then, Sergeant Daniels arrived in another patrol car. He walked over and stood beside Ryan. "Everything all right here?" Daniels asked. "I'm not sure yet," Ryan said. "The ID checks out, but something doesn't feel right." They decided to run the license through the system. They walked back to the car and typed in the details. After a few seconds, the screen blinked. The name didn't come up at all. No record, no history, nothing. "That's not possible," Daniels muttered. "Everyone has something in the system." Ryan looked back at the truck. The man was still sitting calmly, sipping from a silver thermos. He didn't seem worried at all. "Maybe it's a glitch," Ryan said, but he didn't believe it. Not really. He looked back at the man, who now gave him a small nod, as if he already knew this would happen. "It's gonna be a long morning," the man said softly, almost like he was talking to himself. And somehow, Ryan knew he was right. Deputy Ryan Taylor stood beside his patrol car, staring at the computer screen. The name on the old man's license had brought up nothing. No driver's record, no past addresses, no contact numbers, just blank space. It was as if the man had never existed. Sergeant Daniels leaned over his shoulder and frowned. "Try it again," he said. Ryan typed the name and number once more, slowly and carefully. Again, the same result. Nothing. "This doesn't make sense," Ryan said. "This guy's license looks real. It's not a fake." Daniels crossed his arms. "Even if it's not fake, there should still be something. This kind of silence, it's strange." They both turned their eyes back to the truck. The old man was still sitting in the driver's seat, his hands resting on the steering wheel. He looked relaxed, not nervous or confused. That calmness only made the officers more uneasy. "Maybe he's military," Daniels said. "Some special background." "Maybe," Ryan replied. "But that still wouldn't explain why he's not in any database at all." They walked back toward the truck. The man looked at them, still quiet. "Sir," Daniels began, "we're having a little trouble verifying your identity. Do you have any other form of identification?" The man reached into his coat and pulled out an old, folded card. It was worn around the edges. He handed it over without a word. Ryan looked at it. It was a military veteran's ID, but not one he had ever seen before. There were symbols and codes that didn't look familiar. "I've never seen one like this," Ryan said softly to Daniels. "Me neither," Daniels replied. "Let's call the state unit. See if they can run this through a wider system." While they waited, time seemed to slow down. The road stayed quiet. Birds called out in the distance, and the wind picked up a bit. The old man stepped out of the truck and stretched, then leaned against the door. He pulled out the same silver thermos and poured himself another drink. Then, surprisingly, he pulled out a second small cup and poured another one. "You boys want some?" he asked, holding it out. "Just coffee." Ryan looked at Daniels, then back at the man. "No thanks," Ryan said. "We're on duty." The man nodded and took a sip from his cup. He seemed completely at ease, like he had done this 100 times before. Ryan's radio crackled to life. A voice came through. "State unit is on the way. They'll be there in about 20 minutes. Daniel sighed. 20 minutes for a basic check. That's not normal. None of this is normal, Ryan said. They stood there in silence, both watching the man. Something about him felt different. He wasn't scared. He wasn't angry. He was just waiting, like he knew exactly how this would play out. And that made Ryan more nervous than anything else. The minutes dragged by, and Ryan's patience was starting to wear thin. He kept glancing at his watch, counting the seconds. 20 minutes felt like an eternity when you were stuck in a strange situation. The old man, William Cross, still leaned against his truck, sipping from his thermos as if nothing unusual was happening. Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but he couldn't figure out what. "You think he's hiding something?" Daniels asked quietly, watching the man. Ryan didn't respond right away. He studied the old man, trying to make sense of the calmness that surrounded him. If this was some kind of scam or a criminal, why wasn't he acting like one? Why wasn't he panicking or making excuses? "I don't know," Ryan finally said. "He's not acting like someone who's guilty." Just then, a car appeared in the distance. It wasn't marked, but it had a serious air about it. As it drew closer, Ryan saw the sleek black SUV roll down the hill toward them. It wasn't like any other civilian car they had seen that morning. The vehicle's windows were tinted, and it moved with a purpose, like it was on a mission. The old man straightened up when he saw the SUV. Ryan watched him closely, his instincts telling him something was about to happen. The SUV slowed down as it approached, coming to a stop behind the patrol cars. Two men dressed in dark suits got out first, walking with a purpose toward the scene. Then, from the back of the vehicle, a third person stepped out. The man was tall and dressed in a military uniform, his appearance sharp and impressive. His posture was straight, his movements precise. The silver stars on his uniform gleamed in the sunlight. A 4-star general. Ryan froze. He had seen his share of important people in his years on the force, but this was different. The man carried an authority that made everyone pause. He wasn't just any high-ranking officer. He was someone powerful. The general looked at the two officers standing near the truck, and without a word, he walked toward the old man. The officers exchanged confused glances. What was going on? "Gentlemen," the general said in a deep voice, "this man is under my personal supervision. You're going to let him go now." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, Ryan felt like he was in a dream. The general's tone was calm, almost too calm. There was no room for argument, no hesitation in his voice. It was an order, not a request. "What?" Ryan asked, unable to hide his surprise. "Who is this man? Why?" "That's not for you to know," the general interrupted, his gaze never leaving the old man. "You will not file a report. This stop never happened." The air around them seemed to thicken, the world suddenly feeling smaller. Ryan's mind raced. Who was this man, and why was a general so interested in him? They had just pulled him over for a simple traffic stop, but now the situation felt much bigger than they had ever imagined. The general turned back to the old man and gave him a respectful nod. The old man, William Cross, returned the nod, then slowly climbed into the SUV. "What in the world is going on?" Daniels muttered. Ryan had no answer. The SUV drove off, leaving the two officers standing in stunned silence. The peaceful morning was gone, replaced by a mystery neither of them understood. The SUV disappeared down the road, leaving the officers standing in complete silence. Deputy Ryan Taylor could barely move as he watched the black vehicle vanish around the bend. His mind raced, trying to understand what had just happened. Everything about the situation felt wrong, like pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. "I don't believe this," Sergeant Daniels muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. "Who was that guy?" Ryan had no answer. All he knew was that the man they had just pulled over, William Cross, was someone important. The way the general had spoken to him, the respect in his voice, made it clear that Cross was not just an ordinary civilian. But what did that mean? Why had they been pulled into this? Why had the general come for him? That was unexpected, Ryan said finally, turning back toward the empty road. The quiet seemed louder now, almost oppressive. He felt like they had just witnessed something they weren't supposed to see. Yeah, Daniels replied. I've been on the job a long time, but this is something else. I've never seen anything like it. They stood there for a few more minutes, unsure of what to do next. Neither of them had the energy to speak. All they could do was stare at the spot where the SUV had been, their minds still processing what had just happened. Finally, Ryan broke the silence. We need to check in with headquarters. Let them know what happened. Yeah, Daniels agreed, but I'm not sure what to say. We didn't even get a report. Nothing to go on. They climbed back into their patrol cars and drove slowly back to the station. The road felt long, the weight of the mystery hanging over them. Ryan kept glancing at his rearview mirror, half expecting the SUV to appear again, but it didn't. When they arrived at the station, Ryan parked his car and walked inside. He was still trying to process everything, but the station felt different now. It was quiet, like everyone was on edge. He went straight to his desk and started writing down the details of the stop. Even though he knew the report would never be filed, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, something big. Sergeant Daniels sat down beside him. What do you think that was all about? He asked, his voice low. Ryan didn't know. Part of him wanted to believe it was just a strange coincidence, that the old man was just a regular person who happened to have a high-ranking friend. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. The general's words echoed in his mind. This stop never happened. As Ryan stared at the empty report sheet in front of him, a chill ran down his spine. Whatever was going on, it wasn't over. And somehow, he knew they had just been a small part of something much larger, something that could change everything they thought they knew about their jobs and the world around them. The hours passed slowly at the station. Deputy Ryan Taylor sat at his desk, staring at the screen of his computer, but not really seeing it. His thoughts kept drifting back to that moment on the side of the road, when the general had arrived and spoken with such authority. The words "this stop never happened" kept echoing in his mind. It felt like everything he knew about his job had just been turned upside down. Sergeant Daniels came into the room, holding the cup of coffee. He took a seat across from Ryan, and for a few moments, neither of them said anything. The weight of the morning hung over them like a cloud. You think anyone else is going to find out about this? Daniels asked, breaking the silence. His voice was low, as if he didn't want anyone else to hear. Ryan shook his head slowly. I don't know, but I don't think anyone's going to believe us if we tell them. The way the general acted, I don't think he wants this getting out. So what do we do now? Daniels asked, his eyes searching Ryan's face for answers. Do we just forget it happened? Ryan leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping nervously on the desk. He didn't want to just forget it, but what choice did they have? The general had made it clear that this wasn't something they could talk about, but Ryan couldn't help feeling like there was more to the story, something they were missing. I don't know, Ryan finally said, his voice uncertain, but I can't shake the feeling that we'd just seen something important, something we're not supposed to see. Daniels nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. Yeah, I feel the same way. I've been on the job long enough to know when something doesn't add up. And that whole thing? It doesn't add up. Just then, the radio crackled to life. It was a call from dispatch, asking Ryan to meet with the chief. Ryan exchanged a glance with Daniels before standing up and grabbing his jacket. He had a sinking feeling that this was about to get a lot more complicated. As Ryan walked down the hall to the chief's office, his mind raced. What did the chief know? Had he heard anything about the strange incident earlier that day? Ryan couldn't be sure, but the closer he got to the office, the more tense he felt. When he entered, the chief was sitting behind his desk, flipping through a set of papers. He looked up when Ryan stepped in and motioned for him to sit down. Deputy Taylor, the chief said, his voice calm but serious. I've heard reports about the stop you made this morning. Ryan's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he had a feeling it wouldn't be good. "Sir," Ryan began, trying to stay composed, "I don't know what you've heard, but it's been taken care of." The chief interrupted. "Officially, the incident never happened. No record, no report. You're to forget about it and move on." Ryan stared at the chief, his mind spinning. It was as if the whole world was telling him to erase everything from his memory. But how could he? "Sir," Ryan said slowly, "what if there's more to it? What if we're missing something?" The chief looked at him, his expression hardening. "You don't ask questions about things like this, deputy. Just do your job and let it go." Ryan sat back in his chair, feeling a knot tighten in his stomach. He knew there was more to this story, but it seemed like the higher-ups were determined to keep it buried. He left the office in a daze, unsure of what to do next. As he walked back to his desk, he couldn't help but feel like they were being watched, like something was waiting to catch up with them. But the question was, what? The following days felt like a blur for Deputy Ryan Taylor. Everything at the station returned to normal, quiet, routine, with the usual calls and paperwork. But no matter how hard he tried to move on, the events from that morning kept haunting him. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just beyond his understanding, something that was too big for him to ignore. His mind kept returning to the Black Sub, the 4-star general, and the mysterious William Cross. It was like a puzzle with pieces that didn't fit together. Why had the general come to take him away? And why had the chief been so quick to bury the whole thing? One afternoon, as Ryan sat in the break room, going over some reports, Sergeant Daniels walked in, looking more serious than usual. He didn't say anything at first, just grabbed a cup of coffee and sat down across from Ryan. After a few moments of silence, he finally spoke. "Ryan, I've been thinking," he started, his voice low. "What if we're not supposed to know about this? Maybe the whole thing is bigger than we realize." Ryan looked up from his papers, meeting Daniel's gaze. "You think so?" Daniels nodded slowly. "Yeah, I've been hearing rumors about the general, about William Cross. Some of the higher-ups are whispering, but they're not saying much. Whatever happened that day, it's not over. I don't know what it is, but I think we're missing something important." Ryan's stomach tightened. He had been wondering the same thing. It didn't make sense that they had just been told to forget about it. The general's calm authority, the way he dismissed everything with one simple statement, it all felt like a cover-up. "We need to find out more," Ryan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We can't just let it go. Something's not right." Daniels hesitated, glancing around as if checking to make sure no one was listening. "I know, Ryan, but be careful. The more we dig, the more dangerous this could get. There's a reason people are trying to cover it up. If we're not careful, we could find ourselves in way over our heads." Ryan leaned back in his chair, thinking. The thought of staying silent made him uneasy, but the thought of uncovering something even bigger made his skin crawl. He had always followed the rules, but this time, the rules didn't seem to apply. The more he thought about it, the more he felt like they were being watched. It was as if there were eyes on them, waiting for them to slip up. "We have to be smart," Ryan said finally. "We start small. No one needs to know we're looking into it. We just need to find out who William Cross really is and why he's so important." Daniels nodded, a look of determination in his eyes. "You're right, but we need to be careful. This isn't just about a traffic stop anymore. There's something bigger going on, and we're in the middle of it." With that, they made a plan. Ryan and Daniels would begin to gather information quietly, making sure they didn't draw attention to themselves. They had no idea where this path would lead them, but they knew one thing for sure. They had to keep digging. There was no turning back now. The following days passed in a tense blur. Ryan and Daniels worked quietly, gathering what little information they could. They spoke to a few contacts who might know something about William Cross, but most people were either too scared or too loyal to say anything. Everything about Cross felt like it had been carefully hidden, as if there was a wall built around him that no one could get through. One evening, Ryan sat in his patrol car outside the station, staring out at the dark road. The sky was cloudy, and there was a slight chill in the air. He had been going over everything in his mind, trying to piece together the strange details. Why had a four-star general shown up for a simple traffic stop? Why had the chief been so quick to dismiss it all? His phone buzzed. It was a text from Daniels. "We need to meet. I found something." Ryan's heart skipped a beat. He quickly typed a response. "Where?" "The diner on Elm Street." "Come alone." Ryan didn't hesitate. He started his car and drove toward the diner. The streets were empty, and the city felt quieter than usual. As he neared the diner, he saw Daniels sitting in a booth by the window, looking out at the street. When Ryan walked in, Daniels looked up, his face grim. He waved for Ryan to sit down. Without saying anything, Daniels slid a folder across the table. Ryan opened it carefully. Inside were photographs, documents, and a few notes. The first thing he saw was a picture of William Cross, the same man they had stopped that morning. But there was more. There were several other images, all of the same man at different military events, shaking hands with high-ranking officials, standing next to important leaders. "Who is this guy, really?" Ryan asked quietly, his eyes scanning the documents. "I've been asking the same thing," Daniels replied. "And I think I've found some answers." He pointed to a piece of paper in the folder. It was a military record detailing William Cross's career. Ryan read through it quickly. The man had served in multiple high-profile operations, had received countless medals, and had connections in every branch of the military. There were even hints of involvement in classified missions that were never publicly acknowledged. "This doesn't make any sense," Ryan said, his voice low. "Why would someone like this be driving around in an old truck? Why was he just hanging out on a random road?" Daniels leaned back in his seat, his fingers tapping on the table. "That's the million-dollar question, Ryan. Cross is a ghost. Everything about him is covered up, like he's been erased from history. But we know he's important. We just don't know why." Ryan's mind raced. Everything they thought they knew was beginning to crumble. William Cross was not just a retired soldier or a veteran. He was someone deeply involved in operations that were kept secret from the public. And somehow, they had crossed paths with him. But why? What was the general protecting? And why had they been pulled into this mystery? Just then, Ryan's phone buzzed again. It was a call from the station. He hesitated for a moment before answering. "Deputy Taylor," he said. "We need you back at the station," the voice on the other end said. "Something's come up. It's about that stop you made. Come quickly." Ryan's heart sank. "What's going on?" he asked, but the voice had already hung up. "This is getting worse," Ryan muttered, standing up from the table. "Be careful," Daniels warned, his eyes serious. "Whatever's happening, it's not over. We're just getting started." Ryan nodded, his mind racing as he left the diner and headed back toward the station. Ryan's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as he drove back to the station. The call had been brief, but the urgency in the officer's voice left him uneasy. Something had changed. He couldn't help but feel that he was about to step into a situation much deeper than anything he had expected. The streets were quiet as he made his way through the city, the flashing lights of the station growing closer. Ryan's mind was racing, running through everything that had happened since the traffic stop with William Cross. The pictures, the documents, nothing seemed to add up. The more he learned, the less he understood. When he arrived at the station, the front door was wide open and a sense of tension filled the air. Inside, several officers were gathered near the briefing room, talking in hushed voices. The atmosphere felt heavy, and Ryan could tell that everyone was on edge. As he walked in, Sergeant Daniels approached him, looking grim. "What's going on?" Ryan asked, his voice low. "You're not going to believe this," Daniels replied. "But we just got word that William Cross, he's not just some retired military guy. He's connected to something huge, something no one's supposed to know about." Ryan's heart sank. "What do you mean?" "We've been looking into him, right?" Daniels said, glancing around as if checking to see who was listening. "Well, I spoke with a guy who's been around long enough to know a few things. Cross isn't just a former soldier. He's part of something secret, something that even the government doesn't fully acknowledge. We're talking about operations that never officially happened." "Secret military operations," Ryan repeated, his mind trying to process the new information. But why is he involved in all of this? Why was he just out there, acting like a regular guy? That's the part we don't know yet, Daniel said. But I think we're looking at a situation where Cross is tied to something much bigger than we realize. And now it seems like someone is trying to cover up the truth. Just then, the chief stepped into the room, his expression hard. Deputy Taylor, I need to speak with you, he said, his voice cold. Ryan exchanged a quick glance with Daniels before following the chief into his office. The door shut behind them with a quiet click. What's this about? Ryan asked, his tone sharp. He could feel the tension rising. We've been getting calls, the chief said, leaning over his desk, about the traffic stop. There's been an investigation launched into what happened, and they want answers. Your report, everything that happened, is being reviewed. This isn't something we can ignore anymore. Ryan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Who's investigating? And why now? Let's just say it's not a local matter, the chief said, his eyes narrowing. There are higher-ups involved, and they don't take kindly to things being questioned. You need to be careful from here on out. The chief's words were like a warning shot. Ryan could feel the weight of the situation growing heavier with every passing second. He had thought that he and Daniels were uncovering something important, but now it seemed like they had stirred up something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. What should I do? Ryan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Follow orders, the chief replied firmly. Stay out of it. This is no longer a matter for you or anyone else here. Ryan nodded, but inside, he knew he couldn't let it go. He had come too far, and something inside him told him that the truth was just beyond his reach. Even though the chief's warning echoed in his ears, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the brink of uncovering something massive, something that had the power to change everything. As he left the office, Ryan's thoughts were racing. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot.